Hello, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning. Whether you are a night owl or a morning bird, we are happy that you are with us. The latest and greatest episode of the Richard Watkins Podcast. We have an amazing episode in store for you all today. So thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure, and I haven't done this before, but I need to start doing it. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, share, right? If you like this stuff, don't just watch. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, share with your neighbors, your best friends, or your family members. It really helps us out a lot. But we also have to give a huge shout out to the folks that make this podcast possible, the folks over at the Science Policy Action Network. The Science Policy Action Network is here to help you move into this world of innovation. Innovation is coming at us at breakneck speeds, but the Science Policy Action Network is here to hold your hand as you make progress towards the future. Visit the Science Policy Action Network at span-inc.org. That's SPAN-INC.org. Now, with that out of the way, we have a very special guest. We have Carrie Suffern. Carrie Suffern is an American Meteorological Society certified consultant meteorologist. Huh, that was a mouthful. I'll let her walk us through what that all means. And she provides a lot of meteorological services, data mining, weather information, forensic studies, and interpretations of data, personalized forecasts. And I'm just going to stop right there because this is all outside of my wheelhouse. And I know she can do a much better job of explaining exactly what she does than I just did. But without further ado, Carrie Suffern. Carrie, thank you so much for being with us today on the Richard Watkins Podcast.
Richard, thank you so much for asking me to be on. This is a major honor. It's always fantastic to have a conversation with you. Richard, as you all know, is one of the smartest guys out there and a huge advocate for science. So what he said in my intro, all those words, us meteorologists, like everybody, love a good acronym. Basically, that means, Richard, weather nerd, certified weather nerd. So thrilled to be here and let's just have a great conversation about weather.
All right, that sounds great. That sounds great. But like first things first, what do you do? I read a whole bunch of stuff. Break it all down for us. What do you do, Carrie?
Yeah, so I am a consultant meteorologist. What I do is primarily forensic meteorology. So work as an expert witness um, on cases, insurance claims. So our clients are typically lawyers and that are either defending a plaintiff or providing services for the defense or a plaintiff on insurance claims that for weather events such as a hurricane, hail damage, lightning strikes. We work some lightning strikes, tornadoes, of course, severe thunderstorms, you name it, heat, cold, slip and falls. Weather impacts pretty much every aspect of our daily lives. So that's what I do. It's one of the more niche jobs in meteorology. Everyone's heard of broadcast meteorologists, the face of the weather industry that you listen to for the forecast. Then you've got your National Weather Service meteorologists who work in 122 different offices across the country. And those are federal employees. And then you have different industries such as like here in North Carolina, Duke Power, Duke Energy, some different financial institutions that employ meteorologists to do forecasts and outlooks for upcoming seasons. So,
That's awesome. But help us understand, Carrie, right? So where do you hail from and how did you get involved with meteorology?
so I got involved in meteorology. I'm a born and raised Raleighite.
Wait, time
Um,
out, Carrie. Time
yeah.
out, Carrie. You didn't even. My dad joke landed with a thud. I was like, "Where do you hail from?" And I thought you.
Oh,
Why
that's
do I even try? Why do I even try?
That's pretty good. That's pretty
No,
good.
it was terrible. If I had to back it up, if I had to back the train up and explain it, it's just a failure. But
Oh my gosh, no.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But for real, for real, for real, for real. Yeah, where do you come from? And like you were saying, how did you get involved with meteorology?
Okay, kudos to the dad joke. I'm sorry for being so dense and that flew over my head. So, yeah, I was born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina, and a lot of meteorologists you talk to will have one event that really kind of stands out that really triggers their interest in meteorology. Mine was Hurricane Fran, and that was back in the 90s, early 90s, and I was in middle school, I believe, and we had Hurricane Fran. Oh goodness, I'm gonna get this wrong, Richard. I believe it was 1996. And I remember my mom and dad being, just talking about it all day, and then my dad being so excited at night. And I remember waking up the night that Hurricane Fran moved over the Triangle area and just hearing the wind and trees getting knocked down outside, and we didn't have power the next morning for like a week or so, and all the neighbors coming together. We couldn't really, their cell phones weren't a thing back then. Neighbors just checking on neighbors, so there's that community aspect, as well as just this, the excitement sounds like a bad word, um, but just this excitement about this big, unusual event. Um, and there was flooding kind of in downtown Raleigh. They had a lot of trees come down. We were in the North Raleigh area. But yeah, so I think bringing the community together and just, it really triggered my interest in what this major event, how it impacted people, and what caused the event to happen.
So 1996 Hurricane Fran. I remember that as well, and I don't think you're off at all in saying like excitement. I know it's hard to say it because it's absolutely frightening, but there is that kind of sense of maybe wonder, excitement mixed with terror at the same time because you don't know what's going on. It's loud. I remember we had branches all over the place, and like you said, my neighborhood, really all came together. I mean, people are poking their heads outside. Hey, did you have any damage over there? There is that real strange bond that happens in situations such as hurricanes. So you were enamored by this, and what was the thought? Were you thinking that you were going to get involved with meteorology so that you can better understand these weather events, or what was some of the motivation that you were feeling internally that drove you towards meteorology?
So I don't think it entirely hit at that point that meteorology could be a career path. I was in middle school, so I went on to high school. My family ended up moving out to Northeast Wake County, rural area where I'm sure you see all the horses behind me. We had horses, and I think it was at when I was living on the farm and we were having to pay more attention to the forecast if we were going to get severe storms. Obviously, you don't want your animals to get hit by lightning. And it was just the technology was just coming out where you could, I remember it was digital TV was becoming a thing. And there was a special WREL channel where you could turn to it and they had 24/7 weather radar showing. And I remember staying up early in the morning sometimes just watching, seeing if a storm was going to go by in case they needed to run out and get all the horses in. Disclaimer, if you hear thunder and lightning, please don't go outside. That was stupid of me. Though it's trying to save your animal is not worth risking your life. So, but all that to say, I was just enamored by this weather radar, and it did have a purpose, trying to keep my animals safe. But then it developed into this, intrigue with the weather. I have to say, in high school, I was not good at math, physics. I just was one of those that, oh, I hate math. I don't want to go to math. So I started out, I went to NC State University. and a criminology major. I watched too many X-Files when I was growing up, so I thought I wanted to be an FBI agent. And I just kept on this voice in my head. I kept on thinking about meteorology, and I ended up switching my major to meteorology my second year at NC State. And I said, I'm just going to go for it, and I'm going to try to work my tail off at math. And it was really tough the first year because we take all the same math classes as all the engineers. So we go through calculus one, two, three. Then you have to do two semesters of physics and two semesters of chemistry. So it's kind of the hardcore science and math. And we do that so we have an understanding of all the equations that go into making the weather models and where all the assumptions come from and all of that. It's basically fluid dynamics is meteorology. A lot of statistics, of course. And something clicked, Richard. I mean, I think our brains are so amazing that if you put the time into it and you're willing to fail and not fail, but make mistakes. I think you just, you can do a lot more than you think you can, but it takes effort. Some people things come naturally too, and but it was like riding a bike. I worked at it first semester. Calculus didn't make sense, and then something happened that second semester when I took the first physics course and calculus 2, that just something clicked and your brain starts thinking more mathematically. And I fell in love with math. So yeah.
And I had to just thank you so much for putting in that public service announcement. If it's thunder, if there's lightning, just don't go outside. And you also was talking about, animals getting struck by lightning. And I mean, we think about that. I come from, the world of sports. I played football in high school and in college. And one of the biggest things is, you can play football in the rain, but once lightning strikes, they'll cancel the football game. And I remember as a young man, young athlete, we were like, lightning is not going to hit us. I mean, I don't know anyone who has been hit by lightning, right? And still to this day, I don't know anybody who's been hit by lightning. What I want to ask you is, and if you know, so is that a real thing? How often are people or pets or animals property, or how often is lightning strikes occurring?
So wonderful question. That's a great question. I've known two or three people whose horses have been killed by lightning. And we have had several really close lightning strikes. We were traveling just last week, and our sweet people that farm sat for us had to deal with a lightning strike. One hit really close to the house, blew up a tree because that's what happens. Lightning will hit when it hits a tree, hits a tree, the water inside just boils and it explodes. So I think it hit so close to the house that the fire alarm went off and all of that. So, um, I personally don't know. Don't know anybody that's been hit by lightning, but I do know horses have been people whose horses have been hit, and I've seen, the reins of trees that have been hit by lightning. So,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
can, I think this morning, I was up, at the barn feeding the animals. And I heard some rumbling and went back up to the house. And I looked, my husband, Paul and I are both meteorologists, and we have a phone app called Radar Scope. And I'll send you some of the links, Richard, after the podcast if you want to share it to your subscribers and listeners. So looked at radar scope and it has some lightning bolts on there. I'm not sure how accurate, down to the decimal place, latitude, longitude wise they are. Um, but those lightning bolts, there's one that was quite far away from where the actual storm cell was. So those actually can be the most dangerous because their charge is different than the more typical lightning strikes, and they can be, higher voltage. So are more intense.
That's really huge because one of the things that I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel that a lot of people just don't take weather seriously. I know that, when you're in the middle of a hurricane, and you're being hit, yeah, you take it seriously then, but it's really hard for people to really understand the gravity of situations, whether to get an alert on their phone, a warning, a watch, severe weather. It's hard to really determine how to behave in these situations. We're going to get to that in a second, but I want to ask you more about yourself. What does it what is a day in the life of a meteorologist or a meteorological consultant? What does that look like?
So for meteorology consulting, I work for a company called Atlantic States Weather, which is owned by another CCM or consultant meteorologist named TC Moore. So TC will get a phone call from a client, which is would be a lawyer. We work with lawyers primarily, or most of the time. Just it makes it easier to not be categorized as only working for a plaintiff or only working for a defendant. So it's nice to work with a lawyer. Um, and they'll tell us about this case that they have, and maybe it was caused by weather, and we'll go back and look. It's a lot of data mining, so we'll go back and look, say it was a hail case. So we'll look at things like reports, just citizen scientists that call in and say, I got quarter-inch hail or a quarter size hail. So the size of our US currency quarter, that's an inch diameter hail, or maybe a pea-size hail, whatever. So we'll look at all the different reports. We'll look if there was reported wind damage, like power lines down, trees down. Then we'll go look back at the local forecast office. So for us in Raleigh, that would be the Raleigh National Weather Service office, see what warnings they had out, see if they were verified. So every time a weather warning gets put out, no matter if it's like a heat warning, hurricane warning, severe thunderstorm warning, tornado warning, the meteorologists at the Weather Service go look at what actually happened, and those weather warnings are either verified or not verified. So we look at that, and then we go kind of look at what's called the synoptic setup for the day. And that's just a fancy way of saying where the low pressure systems are, high pressure systems are. So we look at all that data, and then we'll call back to the lawyer and say, hey, this is what happened. And they decide, if we're going to write a report on it or what. So there's a lot of phone calls, a lot of conversations, which is fantastic. It's really nice to be able to talk to people, um, you know, not just through text or emails, just on the phone. And then sometimes the lawyer will opt to go forward on a case, sometimes not. And then, if sometimes it ends up going to deposition, sometimes it ends up going to trial. So that's pretty much what it is. It's nice because they end up being projects that you could think of more so than just doing not just but doing a forecast and moving on to the next forecast. Um, so
Incredible. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. Wait, so I guess what I want to know is sometimes these are basic questions. So if you just want to laugh at my ignorance, feel free to do so. But I want to ask questions about like forecasts and stuff, like stuff that you get on your phone. Back in the day, we used to see a weatherman or weather lady wave their hand in front of a map. They still do that. Um,
yeah.
when somebody says there is a 60% chance of precipitation, how are they determining that? And what does that mean? Does that mean um, at that particular time, there's a 60% chance that it's going to rain? Or like, is that specifically what that means? And then overall, how are these determinations made?
Yeah, you are right on with the 60%. That's called percent probability percentage POP, percentage of or probability of precipitation. Sorry about that. And you're exactly right. If it's 60%, no matter at any single time, at any single point within that 60%, you have a 60% chance of seeing rain. So you were right on with that. Um, so the way that in the United States, these forecasts are created, I worked for the National Weather Service in Juneau, Alaska, and in Sterling, Virginia, which is the DC, Baltimore, kind of that metro area. Um, so what happens is you have three forecasters for each shift. And you have a long-term forecaster and you have a short-term forecaster. And then you have a forecaster who is looking at the current situation, like immediately what's going on, answering phone calls, that sort of thing. And then you'll have more people working if it's a severe weather event. So when I was up in the DC office, I remember Hurricane Irene, we had 10, 15 people in the office at one time, if not more. So you'll have the long-term forecaster. The short-term forecaster is looking at immediate to about to day 2, and then the long term is looking from day 2 through day 7. And they're looking at all the weather models. You hear a lot about the American model, which is called the GFS, which is the US's global forecasting system. The ECMWF, which is the European model that we hear a lot about. And then you have smaller scale models, such as like the NAM, and then North American mesoscale model, and something called the HRRR, which is called the high resolution rapid refresh model. So they're looking at all of those and seeing the short-term guy or gal, I'm sorry, short-term forecaster is seeing if there's going to be a need for any warnings going out, and those are immediate. As you know, the storm has to form before a severe thunderstorm warning is issued. And then the long-term person is looking at the weather models and seeing, hey, is there a probability in the winter of us having a winter weather event next week or in the next 4 days? And then there's also something called TAFs, Terminal Aerodrome Forecasts. And those are written for all major airports. And they tell pilots what to expect in the next 24 hours, or if it's in an international airport, next 36 hours, because different airlines are planning on, fuel loads. And if it looks like they're going to be landing, a flight from London is going to be landing during a severe thunderstorm outbreak, and they're going to have to circle, they're going to have to plan for that fuel wise. So those focus on wind speeds and visibility. Obviously, visibility is very important. And especially if you're in a VFR, visual flight rules aircraft, that would be like your general aviation. All our commercial flights, or the vast majority, you can do a commercial flight on a smaller aircraft. But, our 737s, the Deltas, American Airlines that we get on, those are all IFR, instrument flight rules, and pilots can land in very low visibility due to their instrumentation that they have. So most forecasting shifts are somewhere 8 to 10 hours. So, and they're 24/7, 365 days a year. There's going to be at least 2 people. I'm pretty sure all offices have at least 2 people on the desks at one time, and all 122 offices across the country. And so I'm sorry, I got bogged down in the weather service talk. And so the forecasters at the weather service, they come out with their forecast, and all the offices have a very good relationship with the broadcast meteorologists in their area. For us, that'd be like the WRELs, the ABC 11s, and with emergency managers for each of the 100 counties in North Carolina. And that's the same for all the other states. So have an internal chat thing. So they're talking to the other broadcast meteorologists about, oh, this looks like a severe weather outbreak afternoon. Emergency managers will be aware of that as well. So they're able to mobilize on a county and municipal area their resources. And then the broadcast meteorologists, those are meteorologists, that have gone through the same schooling, everything that weather service forecasters have gone through. And they'll do their own forecast. They'll take what the weather service is saying. They'll look at the data on their end, the same data that the weather service is, and they'll communicate that to the public in a way that's easier to understand a lot of times than looking at the weather service text products. So they can decipher that, and then they are master communicators. So that's how we get the information. And then the weather alerts are all connected to, I forget what the National Emergency Alert System is called, but they're connected to that, and that's how we get our alerts on our phone. Yeah.
So you said something earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt, but I did want to ask. You said something about an alert doesn't go out until a storm forms. Does that mean that it's actively raining or actively, what do you mean specifically when you say storm has formed?
Thank you so much for asking that question. As I was saying, and I'm going, oh, that's going to come off as not completely accurate. That was specifically for severe thunderstorm warnings. And Richard, if you are okay with it, I can explain the difference between advisory, watch, warning, if
Oh yeah,
you
please
are
let folks know. Yeah,
okay.
it's so, and also when you're talking about warning and watches, I can you also let us know, does that apply to like thunderstorms, tornadoes, and does the terminology mean the same for both?
Yeah, so it does. Um, so the watch comes before the warning. So what I like to do if I'm talking to school kids or groups that want a meteorologist to come in and discuss the weather is I use a silly little analogy called the cupcake analogy. And you'll see maybe 7 days out from a suspected event, whether that be winter storm warning, hurricane warning, or watch warning, or severe thunderstorm day, that the meteorologist will start to see the ingredients for it. So 7 days out, you're looking at the weather and you can compare it to, oh, you're thinking about making cupcakes next week. Um, and you'll see different things, something called the hazardous weather outlook. Meteorologists will start putting that wording and issuing that specific product, which your broadcast meteorologist will see and will communicate out, hey, next week, this looks like it could be a severe weather day. And when I say severe weather day, I'm meaning specifically thunderstorms, tornadoes. Um, so when you hear severe weather, meteorologists say severe weather, that's typically what that means. And meteorologists will refer to winter damaging conditions as winter weather. And then tropical means hurricanes. Um, and then you've got your non-precipitation events such as, extreme cold, extreme heat, and then wind. Um, so they'll see these ingredients for a severe weather day. And then as you get closer to the event, I'm going to switch this over to winter. So winter weather, you're seeing the ingredients for a winter weather event. So as you get about 2 to 3 days before, 2 days before a winter weather event, and everything still looks on track to produce damaging winter conditions or dangerous winter conditions, and those change, the criteria for that change based on where you're living in the United States. If, say, Minnesota put out winter storm warning every time that we do for like 3 inches of snow, they would have constantly a winter storm warning issued for their entire winter. So winter weather, those criteria change for snow accumulation. Ice is the same everywhere. It takes, the same amount of ice to bring down power lines no matter where you are. And it creates slippery road conditions no matter where you are. Snow is different criteria. Wind chill is different criteria based on wherever you are. So 2 days out, if they're seeing all these ingredients come together, they'll put out a watch, which you can compare to your cupcakes. Oh, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy all the ingredients for these cupcakes and I'm going to have them at home. So you've got all your ingredients at home. All the ingredients are there to create this winter weather situation, severe winter weather situation, or damaging. And then you get to about 24 hours, or you get to when they think the winter weather is going to start. And meteorologists will start seeing the radar show snow. They'll start getting reports in of snow. And that's when the warning is issued. And you can think of that as I've got all my ingredients, I've mixed them all together, and the cupcakes are in the oven. You're imminently going to have cupcakes. You're imminently going to have damaging winter weather. So that's winter weather. Hurricanes, you tend to have a longer run up on hurricanes. You can't, and the models and the forecasting has gotten so good that that cone of uncertainty is continuing to narrow. What you don't know is where you're going to get your strongest storm surge, where you're going to get the most rain, where there's going to be a little
What's a
spin up. And
storm
all this.
surge? Sorry, I hear that term all the time. What is a storm? People on the news and meteorologists use these words that I know are supposed to have like an emotional reaction, but oftentimes, like, I don't even know what a term. What is a storm surge? That word surge is huge. What is that?
So hurricanes, when they're formed in the Atlantic, when they're Pacific, they're typhoons. So hurricanes, they're incredibly low pressure, so they actually like create this bulge of water, and then you've got these strong winds, and you've got this hurricane that's pushing like this bulge of water in front of it. So it's a combo of winds, it's a combo of this low pressure, and you have this bulge of water coming up. And based on the trajectory of the storm, like if it's coming just barreling right into a coastline, you're going to get, you see my hand. So if it's barreling like perpendicular, you're going to get a lot of high storm surge here. But a lot of times it kind of does this, glancing thing, especially on the North Carolina coast, just kind of alongside. And we had obviously not tornadoes too. Um, Most of them, sometimes you have different rotating tornadoes, but hurricanes in the northern hemisphere always rotate anti or cyclonically, which is counterclockwise. So you have these winds going counterclockwise, and you've got the forward momentum. So it just depends on where the forward momentum and these strong winds are impacting the coast. And you won't know that exact that all those two factors until you really see where the hurricane makes landfall and where the strongest winds are in the hurricane. And that can change based on where the strongest convection. And by that, I mean like the individual storms in a hurricane, because that's what a hurricane is just basically like a cluster of storms that starts to rotate on its own. And then that's what makes a tropical storm or hurricane. Yeah. So storm surge, to answer your question, is the seawater.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is so incredible. All right, listen, I don't even know how I can let the conversation progress because every time you say something, you're like dropping all of these nuggets. Listen, audience, I don't know. Again, Carrie Suffern, meteorologist. I don't know if you heard, but if please forgive me if I got this wrong. Only the Atlantic Ocean produces hurricanes, whereas the Pacific Ocean produces typhoons. Is that correct? Did I hear that right?
Yes, they are the same thing, just different names or different terms.
Wait, why? Sorry.
I don't.
I got
I
like
don't
eight.
know. I don't know.
I
That
was like,
I should know the answer. That is a I what do you call it? Terminology thing. I'm thinking, trying to think of a word. English or just a language thing. And I think
Yeah.
there's some historical significance to it, and I'm blanking on what that is at the moment.
So hurricanes have names. Do typhoons have names?
They do, yes. Yeah, they do.
What? We never hear about typhoons. Like what's better? Sorry, I shouldn't say better. What's strong if a typhoon and a hurricane got into a fight, who would win? No, but what's more powerful, the typhoon or the hurricane? Is there a difference between storms that generate over the Atlantic Ocean and storms that generate over the Pacific Ocean? Is there a difference?
So, oh goodness, Richard, there's no dynamic difference. And by that I mean like the physics that goes into creating a hurricane or typhoon. In the Philippines, they are hit by, horribly damaging typhoons that produce a lot of flooding, a lot of high winds. I believe Japan gets some. The Indonesian islands do, or Indonesia does. I imagine I need to look this up. I'm very curious about this now. I want to say that typhoons they're the strongest typhoons when you consider them can be I think the most powerful tropical system has been a typhoon, and maybe that's due to just the Pacific Ocean being bigger and it having more sources of energy, such as, warm seawater, a longer fetch, longer duration that it's over the ocean. So fetch for the winds, that just means how long the winds have been blowing over a flat surface. um yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but logically, I would say typhoons, and due to them being the Pacific Ocean, could on average create more powerful storms.
This
So
is
that's
incredible.
something I'm gonna look into. I feel like I should know that, and I don't.
No, it's all right. I don't even know the questions that I'm gonna ask. Like I hear you say something, and I'm like, whoa, mind blown. And so again,
That's a great question. And
meteorologists.
for your listeners too, if there's somebody that's listening, that's a good thing to read up on and research, and email Richard if you find out stuff. So yeah.
All right, so you've been studying weather, and again, I don't know how to ask these terms of such, devastating forces of nature. But what do you find to be the most interesting weather event? Is it the hurricane? Is it a tornado? What do you, Carrie, view as one of the most interesting weather events that you've experienced?
That I've personally experienced. I love winter weather. I really like winter weather. I love high latitude weather systems. Um, and I've not never been in a blizzard, but I did in Juneau forecast a really in one day. It's when Juneau, Alaska, when I was working at that weather service office, and it's such a large area that you forecast for. So it's the panhandle of Alaska. I remember putting out a winter storm warning for White Pass, which is north of Skagway Haines. It goes into Canada, and then a severe thunderstorm warning for all the way down south, um, for near Ketchikan, Alaska. So that was really interesting. I don't know, Richard, if you remember the 2 feet of snow that we got in the early 2000s, or 1999, 2000 here in the Triangle area.
No, I
That,
definitely remember that.
yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So snow, winter weather. I find flooding very interesting. Floods is the biggest weather killer. And it's very sad what happened to Texas, and then here in the Raleigh area just last week with Chantel, um, dropping all that rain and some of the flooding along the Eno River. But flooding, I find very fascinating that there's so much energy and capability in the atmosphere to hold that much water and just dump all of that water at one time. And just where is it going to flow? I mean, the different, hydrological paths that it takes, and paths that the water follows towards streams and rivers. So I find that fascinating. I think here living in North Carolina now, and especially with what happened with Helene, um, and the mudslides that those created. Mudslides are very intriguing. They're horrible, awful. And just, I think just the amount of energy that it takes for something devastating like a flash flooding, which was what happened in Texas. And then you could call what happened in Helene flash flooding. That was a flash flood. And then what happened last week with Chantel. I find flooding very, very interesting.
And I'm glad you mentioned, that, because one of the things that popped into my head, because we've now kind of jumped in the time machine and reflected on weather events from when we were children. And you're a meteorologist, and one of the things that I am interested in, and I want to get back into the flood conversation in a second, but one of the things that I'm interested in is understanding, since you've been in meteorology, eh, what has changed? I mean, I guess, i.e., when you hear the coverage, you're like, once in 100-year flood events. I mean, what have you seen? And has weather have trying to figure out a way to say it. Have these weather events changed since you've been, a meteorologist? And what have you noticed?
Um, so disclaimer, when I'm going to talk about flooding again, I this is just me, my view, what you said. Um, Forecasting wise, the things that have changed since, so I graduated from NC State in 2007. The long-term forecast models are performing really, really well, and they actually outperform the meteorologists. I believe it's like day 4 days 4 plus, they outperform the meteorologists. Don't quote me on the exact day. But this is, another thing. Shout out to meteorologists. You do need the meteorologist for the short term, because the weather models are not going to be able to send out the warnings, and they just don't have the instinct as an actual person does for things that are going on right at that moment. And they don't have the local knowledge of knowing, oh, this neighborhood sits a little bit lower and it tends to get, um, stronger winds when the storms are coming from the southwest, something like that. So in terms of actual events, I can't remember, Richard, as many flooding events. And maybe it's just, I remember, oh, 7, 8 years ago, we had this thunderstorm out. We're in the Rollsville area, Northeast Wake County. We had this thunderstorm sit over us and drop something like 6 to 7 inches within 2 hours, which is an insane amount of rain. We've lived out here since 1998. Don't remember that happening ever. And then I know we had a lot of flooding with Fran. I know Floyd, we had a lot of flooding. Um, I don't remember. I remember hearing about some mudslides in the Appalachian Mountains, but nothing like what happened with Helene. So I want to say more flood events. And maybe that's just they're being reported more. I can't pinpoint why that, or maybe I'm remembering them more now, but I would say flooding.
Yeah, and again, thank you for bringing that up. And I guess I just, want some like advice, just as, a father, a homeowner. When you talk about, and again, you mentioned Texas, and I don't want to just focus on the horrific flooding in Texas. I kind of want to think more broadly about weather, but I guess when you say something like once in 100-year flood event, one of the things that, I was really trying to understand was this is just more rain at a single time than anyone had seen in a century. And that's why I was kind of asking you, when I see a weather warning, and it's hard to gauge whether or not that weather warning that you get is going to be a once in a century event. How I just don't understand, like, how is a individual supposed to behave? I guess you take every single warning as it could be a once in 100-year event. What do you, as somebody who studies this, but you're also, a mom and a homeowner and own a farm, how do you any advice to the audience on how to deal with these things?
So, if you'll if you'll let me, or we have time, what I'm going to do is talk
Please
about kind
take
of
as
the
much
social
time as you
aspect
need.
that you just asked about. The second thing, I would love to get kind of nerdy about how the 100,000 year terminology comes about, if we have time for that. But first, I want to focus on, of course, what you just asked. Um, yeah, the purpose of warnings, watches, when you see a watch come across for flood, winter, severe weather, and I want to pull out severe weather just one more time, to make sure that it's not getting all mixed up in the others. Severe thunderstorm watches, those will be issued the day, maybe an hour or two before an event, the actual thunderstorm forms, because severe weather is more temporal. It's just a shorter temporal scale than your winter weather events, your tropical events, your high wind warnings. So when you see that severe thunderstorm warning, or I'm sorry, the severe thunderstorm watch or tornado watch come across your phone, that means within the next few hours you are likely to see a severe thunderstorm or tornado. And then the warnings mean, and you have your phone and you have a GPS on it, wherever you are, it's happening now, and you just stay where you are and get to a safe space. So just disclaimer on that, because we're in severe weather season in North Carolina right now. So is a lot of other people across the country. So whenever you see a warning come across, you have had many eyes, forecaster eyes on it. It's not computer generated. That is an actual forecaster that has looked at that warning, watch or warning, and put it out there. So the purpose is to act on it. And especially for flooding, you should act on it. I know there's a lot of smart people at the Weather Service and in academia that are going around and doing surveys on how people behave when they get warnings and what kind of terms are helpful. So, for example, if you get a flash flood warning and it says this could be a once in 1,000 year event, I imagine that would be more impactful to you, Richard, right? Yeah, than just a basic
Well,
flash flood warning.
that
Yeah,
was
go
that was
ahead.
great. Like, what? Yes, it would. I don't know
Mhm.
how somebody would say, like, would communicate that. But then if I get that, where do I even go?
Yes, and I just want to say there's work in the Weather Service. I know for tornado warnings, they're putting in destructive, like really key words, which your broadcast meteorologist will see and communicate to you saying, hey, the Weather Service has said destructive. I mean, this is terribly dangerous. This is 100 year, once in 100 year event. So they will communicate those keywords out. And I know that there's a push in the Weather Service, and they're already doing it to add those keywords in. So where would you go? That really depends where you are. You don't want to be in a car ever. And you never, ever, ever cross a road in a car. It's just a couple of inches of water will sweep your car off the road. So even if you're like, you see, Bob and his truck go across the puddle and you're in an equally, or a flooded roadway, you're in an equally big truck and you think you can make it, you don't know if that road has been washed away in the intervening seconds, or it's going to wash away right when cross the road.
So should I
Um,
walk?
no, you should just find a safe space to go and sit it out. Don't, yeah, and that stinks. I mean, if you want to get home, um, eh, be be prepared. I really encourage people to come up with a plan for their families. Say, I've got a kid in middle school, so say that there's a flash flood warning. I can't, we live kind of off of some little country roads. I can't get to him. Come up with a plan. Is he going to go home with a buddy? And make sure he knows that. Maybe I remember growing up, my parents would have a code word that they would communicate to a friend's parents to say that you can go home with so and so. So maybe come up with a code word with your kids if you can't get to them because of severe weather. And maybe roads are flooded in between you and them, and they've got to get home from school. They're not going to let the kids, for some reason, shelter at the school, which they should. I think all schools will do have the plans to enable kids to shelter there if need be. Um, but come up with a code word, come up with a plan, and go through it with your kids. And talk to other parents, friends, other family members, maybe an aunt, uncle, what to do if severe weather was going to happen. And then I would encourage parents to talk to their kids about different drills that they do at school. What do they do if there's a tornado warning? Have they practiced going out and, going in a locker room, going out in a hallway where there's no windows? And I mean, doing the thing where you put your head down and you cover your head. Make sure they know how to do that, what situations would lead to that. You mentioned sports earlier. I know golf courses, I know a lot of football stadiums have the lightning detection equipment, the little warning that goes off. So make sure your school has that. So ask a lot of questions. Ask the schools if they have a NOAA weather radio, what their policies are. Check as a homeowner, check if your floodplain that you're in. I know in Wake County, we've got Wake County GIS that you can load up the different floodplains and see, and those are categorized like precipitation amounts, 10-year, 5, 10, 1 year, 100-year, 1,000-year floodplains. So you're aware of what creeks may flood, and then come up with a plan. If we're going to get a lot of rain, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to go. We're going to go over to the neighbor's house that sits up high or something like that. So as we talked about, kind of full circle, weather and these events really become a community effort. And it's something that I love about the weather, because we have all this amazing technology. AI is a big thing that's a big discussion in meteorology. But you really do have the people and community aspect that you need to think of, and it's actually going to be your community that needs to get together, whether that be, your personal circle of family and friends, or your wider town, your wider city, that needs to talk about and ask questions, like asking questions to your school, contact your city, your mayor of the city that you live in, and ask about different questions. And I feel like it is something that a lot of people like to talk about. So asking questions is not a bad thing ever.
No, well, I've never really had an opportunity to talk to a meteorologist, about these questions that I have, which is why I'm just so grateful and thankful that I have a friend in you, a meteorologist. And I'm just grateful that you've chosen this area to go into, because it's just absolutely fascinating. And, when we were, discussing, you coming on, one of the things that I was just thinking selfishly is like, all right, what can I learn from this conversation so that I can be better prepared? And I've already heard, so much. Like, part of what I heard is hunker down, hunker down, hunker down. That's like the big thing. So I hear people all the time talking about, why didn't you get out there? Why didn't you get out of there? Well, sometimes it's just there's no chance. There's no when so Helene is something that people think about, rightfully so. And I think that was around 24. It was just last year. Devastating. Western parts of North Carolina. But I remember just 3 or 4 years prior to that, that area suffered devastating rainfalls, and they flooded like within moments. of like because it was just so much rain. And I thank you so much for pointing that out. Because I think it really kind of points to the way we think, about weather and how serious it is. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. What I want to do, and obviously you're welcome to say anything you want, but I always want to be mindful of your time. So I want to squeeze in this question, and like I said, feel free to take it wherever you'd like it to go. I have the extreme honor and privilege of being the host of this podcast, and it gives me the opportunity to talk to some of the most amazing people on the face of the earth. And I definitely consider you in that group, obviously. And what happens is an hour goes by quicker than the snap of a finger. And I kick myself because I should have asked this question. I should have asked that question, especially when we're talking about something like weather, because the information that you've just given us it can very well save somebody's life, right? Like somebody can watch this, and when they are in a situation on a flood, it could be the difference between them believing that they can make it to wherever they're going in a vehicle and them staying put. So I just again, thank you so much. But with that being said, I guess what should I have asked you? Right? I'm just going with the flow, asking questions. I'm kicking myself for making that stupid dad joke about where you hail from earlier. But with that being said, what should I have asked? And if you could go ahead and answer that question, what is a question that I perhaps should have asked, or maybe you were prepared for and I didn't get to it?
So, in my opinion, you asked all the right questions. That I forgot to mention something as we were talking about acting on weather warnings. And you just discussing about how people deciding whether to go, risk it, which I would never recommend, or stay put. Made me think about something that I read once. When people hear a weather warning or hear any information, there's a human tendency. I'm not a psychologist, I read this somewhere, but there's a human tendency to want to go verify that information from another source. So if you get this weather warning, and I do this too when I read a news headline or something, I'm going, really? Is that true? And then I'll go look at another source of news. So there's this human tendency to want to verify. So, what I would really encourage people to do, Richard, is to look on weather.gov. That's the National Weather Service site. And I'll send you these links and maybe like just a one steps 1, 2, 3 to get your forecast. Um, so really get familiar with that weather service site and start reading and looking at the headlines. And I'll circle this in the document that I send you. Um, and read about it if there's a hazardous weather outlook out. Read through that. Think about what that means. Is it for heat? Is it for severe storms? And if it's for severe storms, maybe 2, 3 days in the future, talk to your kids about that and say, hey, during pickup today, there might be severe storms, and remember our plan that we came up with. So you don't feel pressured to risk it to go get your kid. If you're worried about how they're going to handle carpool, for example, are they going to have the kids out when there's lightning? Talk to the principal, give the principal a call, and by and large, I mean, people don't work in schools because they don't like kids. They're going to really want to protect those children, and they're going to want to hear from parents that care about what happens to the kids. So ask questions. Become a weather connoisseur. Look at that National Weather Service service site. If you really want to dig a little bit deeper and kind of start learning about the weather models, there's a really good free website called Pivotal Weather, which I'll send you, and you can start playing around with looking at the weather models. That's what Paul and I do. We look at one of the short run models that produces output every hour, and it actually shows where it thinks storms are going to be. So you could start learning that. You do have to pay for this app, Radar Scope, but that is a really good app to see which storms are producing lightning, which are not. So prepare, make sure you know what to expect in the next 3 to 4 days. And if it looks like something's going to happen based on you perusing through the National Weather Service site, listening to your local broadcast meteorologist, review your emergency plans with your kids and really think about situations where you would feel like you need to risk it, such as picking your kid up from school, picking your kid up from a friend's house or something. So, and come up with a plan so you don't feel like you need to take that risk, and whoever your kid is with doesn't need to take a risk with you, with your precious child. So,
Wow.
and I do want to say, as a farm owner, I love my animals, but your life is not worth risking running around in a thunderstorm after an animal. So I would be prepared, like, don't leave your dog outside if it's, and you're going to be at work, and it's going to be a severe thunderstorm situation and your dog doesn't have shelter, something like that.
Woo, man, that was intense, Carrie. I don't know if I was
I'm
ready.
sorry.
No, it's
I love.
okay. This is serious stuff, and so serious conversations have to be had. And if one person is able to make a better decision for themselves and their family, then we've accomplished what we set out to accomplish. Carrie, again, thank you so much for what you do, your service that you provide. And you and I both know it's always service above self. So just thank you so much for being on our podcast. For each and every one of you at home who is checking this out, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free, regardless of whether you live in Washington, if you live in New York, North Carolina, or Texas, make sure you pay attention to the weather, the National Weather Service. Make sure that you are knowledgeable about weather, and you take these watches and warnings very, very seriously because they could be the difference between life and death. I am your host, Dr. Richard Watkins. I thank you all so very much for being with us on this very important episode of the Richard Watkins Podcast. And never forget that the future is not something to wait for, it is something to build. Thank you all so very much, and have a great day.